Alright, we're back. Today we're talking about revolution all day.
Bring it up.
France is in the habit of revolution. Europe's getting in the habit of it. The big trend is spreading. The Revolution of 1830, Kings Charles X of France and Louis Philippe of France. The Revolution is 1848. About the Frankfurt Assembly, Louis Kossuth, Francis Joseph I, and then Giuseppe Mazzini. Joseph. Napoleon III, so you come back to the Bonapartists in France. And the Crimean War. Breaking the peace, how about ending with yet another Treaty of Paris, Treaty of Paris 1856. Go to Italy, how about Victor Emmanuel II, Count Camillo di Cavour, and Giuseppe Garibaldi. Questions on any of that? Let's dive in. I talk about Louis XVIII, like I said, fairly calm monarch, basically one to everything kind of runs smoothly. Brother Louis the XVI. Louis XVIII dies in 1824, so the throne had gone to Charles X. Charles X did not learn the lessons the Bourbon family had learned during the French Revolution. Essentially doing everything he can to turn the clock back before the French Revolution and restore the Ancien regime. Essentially, he wants the monarchy to have full, absolute, uncontested power. So no legislators, no limits on power, nothing. One man with all the power, with all the marbles. And the group of supporters he had called the ultra-royalists who were working to try to make that happen. Well, say his Charles X grew extraordinarily unpopular, and by July of 1830, people rised up against him. So the Revolution of 1830 is also called the July Revolution. It's going to be quick. It's going to be comparatively bloodless compared to the French Revolution, and over within a few days. People rose up, barricades went over across Paris, trying to keep the troops from defending the king, or trying to suppress the rebellion wherever it was. People were in an uproar, demanding that the king step down, demanding that he respect the new constitution. Some are calling for abolition of the monarchy and restoration of the republic. But instead, Charles X, seeing the writing on the wall, like I said, he's not entirely too daft. Besides, wants to avoid the fate of Louis XVI and quickly leaves the country. So at that point, the government replaces Charles X with his cousin, Louis Philippe, for the next 18 years. Louis Philippe is brought in as king. He's called the bourgeois monarch. Bourgeois, a French phrase translated in English, not an exact translation, basically means middle class. Basically, the average, just trying to be an average guy. So going with a more traditional French name. You have a lot of men have hyphenated names in France. The first and middle name kind of combined together. Probably most famous example from our generation, John Louis Picard. So he's one of Louis. Instead of here. Instead of Louis the 19th or Philip VI. It's Louis Philippe. So, he's drawing his support for his rule from the upper middle class. Dresses very moderately, doesn't have these big fancy military uniforms or fancy frilly robes. Basically, he's dressing in a middle class business suit, like types that were popular in the 1830s. The way you kind of see the monarchy kind of dressing today. Like say, go to England, you see Prince Charles and Prince William. They're dressed in business suits usually. Nothing fancy, any fancy regalia or decorations. So basically, trying to portray himself as a man of the people. Then people kind of like the touch. He institutes a couple of reforms at the outset. Louis Philippe lowers the financial qualifications for voting, which ended up doubling the number of people eligible to vote in France from 100,000 up to 200,000. But still, only a fraction of the French vote, maybe only top 3 or 4 or 5%. Nevertheless, it was a step forward. Yeah.
It went from 100,000 to
200,000. Yeah. What was that? Yeah, run check for me one. But one thing that it ended up happening outside of France was there's a few murmurs here and there, but in the Netherlands, the Belgians rose up against the Dutch, and the independent neutral Belgium was created. Belgians claim their own independence. Now, the reason why Belgium was allowed to exist because of the July Revolution, and from the July Revolution, all the upheaval in Europe, is the Concert of Europe decides that Belgium did not upset the balance of power. It's not carving up any country. It's a neutral country, so they're not really going to be a player in the affairs of Europe. So they're not upsetting the apple cart. They're not upsetting the balance of power. So they let Belgium go. And from them we get tasty waffles. More Belgium, just waffles.
Yeah.
But seeing the success of the July Revolution, it is inspiring people elsewhere in Europe. You have uprisings in Poland. The Poles resisting against Russia. Italy, revolutions against some of the governments there and push for unification. But both revolutions are crushed in both countries. The Russian army comes in and eviscerates the Polish rebels. And Clemens von Metternich takes the Austrian army and destroys all the uprisings in Italy. Basically, those uprisings put down very quickly. You do have a couple of modest changes in this time period. In 1834, Great Britain passes a reform bill which increases the number of voters eligible in that country. But again, men only could vote. Lower classes had no vote. Basically, it extended the vote to the entire middle class, not just the upper class landowners. Like I said, Britain is slowly moving towards universal suffrage. It's very, very slow. 1832 Reform Bill. So some interesting things are happening in Britain. So London is growing very rapidly. They are it is the epicenter of British financial and industrial activity. But the problem was, though, the city's growing so rapidly and so large that it's very hard to contain. You have a lot of crime erupting because of all the poverty. And previously, like I say, you didn't have large professional police forces. Like I say, you'd have your constables and your sheriffs that were basically just messengers of court. Like I say, whenever there was a riot, you'd send in the army. And I said those were sending in armed troops against unarmed rioters. That's not going to end very well. So what they decided to do is they start instituting a professional police force in London this time, the early 1820s and 1830s.
Is what martial law come from, or was that?
Martial law comes before that. Martial means military law. Martial meaning war. Basically, the military comes in, starts making all the rules for the civilian population. Usually it's in an emergency situation like a riot, wartime, something like that. Basically, they suspend the rights of the people and suspend the law and laws, basically military ruling by decree.
Did they do that during the American Revolution?
In the early phase of the war, the areas the British occupied, they did impose martial law, basically trying to maintain control of the areas. I'd say you'll have it sometimes even in the United States. If there's some kind of natural disaster like an earthquake or a hurricane, everything disrupted, National Guard come in and impose martial law, curfews, arrest people being outside of curfew, mass arrests and try to prevent looting, things like that. But there are different degrees of it in different countries.
Can't help Katrina, any.
Exactly. My wife flew to New Orleans that time. She still has nightmares about it.
She was living in New Orleans.
In New Orleans, her tree came through her house. Our oldest, I adopted him. He was living with her at the time. Said he still, to this day, he hates thunderstorms. Can hardly sleep through them. He's a tough kid. Not a lot bothers him. That's one thing he does. London Police. The Home Secretary, basically their version of the Secretary of the Interior, meaning Robert Peel at the time, later Prime Minister, initiates this professional police force designed to try to keep people safe, solve crimes, and so forth. So that's where you get the interesting nickname for the police in London, the Bobbies, after Robert Peel. And they wear these copper badges signifying who they were, so coppers, cops. That's where it comes from. British police.
From the copper bed.
Yeah.
Interesting fact. That's a good trip because when I used that, Peel.
Of course, police departments, some are more effective than others. Some had problems with corruption. Some had problems with civil liberties. But it's very complicated problems over many generations. But life goes on in Europe. I get to 1846. 1846, you have a massive depression. Economic depression breaks out across the continent, hitting the agricultural sectors and the industrial sectors both. A lot of hardship comes to France. Well, here's the problem. France is suffering. They've suffered through these economic reversals before. There's been a panic in 1837, once before that. But it comes out about this time, about 1847-48, that a bunch of scandals involving the monarchy. Basically, a bunch of his officials basically robbing the people blind. The king is living lavishly while this embezzlement and theft is going on, and while the people are in poverty. It's not going over too well. And what happens is, in the midst of all this, people are asking the king for reforms. So things are bad enough, king living high on the hog and them suffering, but people saying, they actually could get past that. They're saying we need changes so our economy can thrive, so the people can have a stronger voice. They're asking him to expand the vote. They're asking him to initiate reforms to root out corruption in his government and provide jobs and education for people. But Louis Philippe is refusing each and every request for reform. There's a few reforms in 1830. That was it. So, February 24th, 1848, moderate and radical Republicans, that is, supporters of a republic, rose up and established a provisional government declaring that they were now the voice of the people and declared the monarchy to be vacant.
Who was that?
Group of radicals in Paris. They said, we're the government now. People started rallying to them. You have uprisings, demonstrations, near riots across Paris. Louis Philippe, of course, not being a fool, decides maybe it's time he made his departure. That's not to make a fight of it, not make civil war, because in the past, kings in France had not fared too well in those. So he leaves the country and never comes back. There was briefly an attempt by the monarchists to try to fill the throne again, but instead, supporters of the Republic have gained power, and they announced a vote for what they call the Constituent Assembly. Constituent Assembly. Basically, all the men in France could vote for this universal male suffrage. New constitution be announced. Condition, this provisional government is brought in what they call national workshops for the poor. Basically, those who were hit hard by the depression, unemployed, they could go to these national workshops. Basically, government-run factories. They'll pay them to work, produce various products, give them a nice little wage to tide them over. Basically, employment for the unemployed. That the demand is very high. These national workshops, the number of people employed by them rises from 10,000 in March to 120,000 by June.
It worked in the...
Yeah, it works in these little factories run by the governments. The thing is, it's very expensive because they're not selling very much. Basically, just paying these people to work to do something. But France's economic problems are so bad that the provisional government just couldn't afford it. So in June, they announced they had to abandon it, shut it down, which touched off 4 days of violent rioting in the city. Well, the new Constitution was ratified in November. It came to be called the Second Republic. And the First Republic was 1792, after the overthrow of Louis XVI, until Napoleon. This one's not going to last too long, for reasons we'll get to. In this new republic, you'd have a one-house national legislature. About 750 delegates. That number's worked very well for them in the past. They extend universal male suffrage for a few more years, going back to a more restricted form. And they'd have a president in charge of the government. An elected president, elected by all the people. And he'd have a 4-year term. Well, of course, now it would be the leading figure that people could rally around in this time for lead France. Bonaparte.
That was in France?
This is in France, yes.
Like here. Well, yeah.
Yeah, they had a president. The idea of a president 4-year term said that it seemed like a reasonable amount of time. It seemed to be working well in the United States. That weren't exactly copying us. They're kind of, but they said, they got a few ideas from us.
So you're saying that was like the last resort move, putting the hard argument he's different from the president.
Yeah, he's different. Remember, Napoleon Bonaparte, the first one, he died at the St. Helena Island in 1821. So 1848, he's long since gone. His son, who had been Napoleon II, he's gone. He died too. He's only 21. He died. So they go with the cousin. Remember the brother that Napoleon had made the King of Holland, King Louis the Good? They're bringing out his son, Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. So we'll call him Lou. have the elections in December 1848. And Bonaparte jumps in and runs. Resounding victory. And so people love him. It's like the good old days again. Like I said, he's a reasonably effective, stable ruler. But this is the beginning of what they called the Revolution of 1848. The Second French Republic must be spreading outward. Go to Prussia. Uprisings in that country. In response to a demonstration in his country, Prussian King Frederick William IV king from 1840 to 61. Frederick William announces a number of reforms in Prussia, including abolition of censorship, establishes a new constitution, and pledges to work for a united Germany. That's something the German people really wanted. So they didn't want these 30 or 40 different countries. They want all the German people united into one big happy country. Of course, see what happens when that happens. But, yeah.
This is a very elementary question, but when did Bismarck come into play?
He's going to be coming into play really in the 1870s and 1880s. He's getting close. So he's alive at this time, but not quite on the scene yet. He's coming. So, as part of his pledge to work for United Germany, he works with the other German states and creates what came called the Frankfurt Assembly, because it's meeting in the city of Frankfurt. There must not be another Diet of Worms. All German men can vote in elections for this assembly. It's a universal suffrage in Germany. It's established here in 1848, but the rulers of these different German states, they're not going for it. They don't like this idea of this united Germany, especially because they're not going to be the ones in charge of it. More and more Germans recognize there's going to be a united Germany, it's going to be Prussia in charge of it. So the winds are blowing.
I have a question. Define that when you say male suffrage or
male
the
suffrage,
research,
yeah.
right? When you
Suffrage means right to vote. What they called universal suffrage meant basically everyone can, all adults can vote. Or usually history means all men can vote. Yeah. Universal. What's called universal suffrage at that time is actually more properly described universal male suffrage. All adult men can vote.
Oh, okay. All the men can vote.
Yeah, all men can vote. There are women pushing for women to have the right to vote. The Seneca Falls Convention is actually in 1848 calling for women to be given the right to vote in the United States and equality under law, but it's really not until the late 19th or 20th century that any country even comes close to granting women the right to vote.
So what was the age limit on the men? Like
21.
18? Okay.
Like, I understand later, because it's about, like, what, 80 years to even been over so much. And must not have been that hard to happen that there. I mean, it took them 72 years or whatever it was.
Yeah, for women getting the right to vote, it's 72 years between the Seneca Falls Convention to getting the right to vote in the United States. And like I say, World War I caused a big wave of countries to enact women's suffrage for a variety of reasons we'll get to later on. But the thing that women are fighting as much as anything is there are a lot of women who want the right to vote, but they're fighting social convention. But there's certain things that men do and certain things that women do. Next, say, and this is the Victorian age, the idea there are separate spheres for men and women. There's man's work and there's women's work. The two will not mix. Next, say, men felt there is a very paternalistic, very patronizing attitude about women at this time in Europe and in the Americas as well. That women were too meek and not educated enough to be able to be trusted with the vote. So therefore, men had to take care of women and do the voting for them.
he's talking past him.
I think it's what they
I
believe.
told her don't get worked up over here. She got that.
what they I say, and women had to fight very hard to overcome this stereotype.
Right.
Say, the idea when men owned absolutely everything in the marriage, whatever property a woman brought into the marriage became property of the husband. So kids are basically were the property of the husband. So you get divorced, husband gets everything, including the kids.
Wow.
Actually, it took women a very long time to overcome these stereotypes, these attitudes about it. It's a lot of work. What's that?
They allowed divorce back then?
Some cases in some countries, in some cases like England, it literally took an act of parliament to get the divorce. That they would basically vote, said, we're going to give them a divorce or not. Can you imagine the debate said, well, no, I think we should just give them one more chance. And so he promises he'll quit drinking and quit fooling around. So I trust this.
So other people decided they...
Yeah, other people would.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes, you're still.
Like say in the United States, very complicated, long, drawn-out court proceedings. Sometimes the resolution is unclear. Said, yeah, you're divorced, but when and how was such... It's very complicated.
Today you can just go online and get a divorce.
Pretty much. Like I say, it's pretty much, it's easier to get divorced and get married.
I did it. I went online and divorced my brother both.
You can do it for $250.
Fine.
It's only like $250.
No ma'am, 65.
Maybe not getting more here. Don't think she knows.
$65.
I gotta talk to you.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
But really, it comes down to questions about gender roles in society. What's proper and acceptable for a man? What's proper and acceptable for a woman? Example, ladies, you think of a man, you think there are just certain things a man should do, certain things a man should never do. This is how they act, how they dress, how they treat people. Same thing men think about women. Men think about themselves, women think about themselves. I say that even today, the idea of there are still certain stereotypes still holding over, that women should still conduct themselves a certain way. And we think that, I we talk about this with Mary Wollstonecraft, her idea that what do we think about men who are outspoken with their opinions, determined, ambitious? Is that somebody you typically admire? It usually is. But give a woman those same characteristics. Ambitious, outspoken, opinionated. Is that somebody you admire? In some cases, no.
I think some women would.
Yeah.
Men probably would chop her head off.
No, it's still that way. It's kind of that way today. It's women's. Still a lot of men who think that women should be subservient in the home.
But you've come a long way though. You have a woman running president.
Oh yeah. But still, even then, think about the differences in opinion. Think Donald Trump. He just flies off the handle all the time. Says exactly what he thinks.
She can't do that.
But Hillary Clinton, she says what she thinks. Well, that little.
Yes, he right.
Who does she think she is? That's the problem she had when she came to Arkansas in the 1970s. This young, liberal, educated woman, very accomplished. I said she's not going to back, the kind of woman who's not going to back down from anybody, tell people exactly what she thinks. I said, well, these old country boys here in Arkansas, they didn't know what to do with that. They'd never seen anyone like that. And so the wives never talked to them like that before. Unless they came home drunk or something. But, like I said, there were some professional, respected women in Arkansas at that time, but they were not outspoken like she was.
She ran the country.
So,
Just,
Did women
I'm still
accept,
gonna
like, back then, did they accept not being able to vote? I mean, I
a
know
lot
some
of them did. In fact, there were anti-suffragists, women who were basically fighting against giving women the right to vote.
Yeah, I saw this thing on Facebook, it's like a group of anti-feminists. And it's like getting to be a big deal. It's
Like I said, for every social movement, you have this strange counter movement, reaction to it. Like I say, it works in society as well as in physics. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Let's say, think about some of the women in your own families. Just think how your grandmothers might think a woman going out in public in jeans, woman with a tattoo, woman with ripped pants. That would have been a scandal.
Yeah.
And so they would not have treated you as an. I say women would not have treated you as an equal. Women wouldn't have. So they would look simply at the surface
Right.
rather than what you have to offer as a person. They kind of ways some women are dressing that 30 or 40 years ago would have been scandalous. But today it's accepted. 30, 40 years from now it'll be quaint.
My grandmother told me that her daddy didn't let her wear red.
Except a lot of women wouldn't wear makeup because there are only just certain types of women who wore makeup.
Really?
Except,
Yeah.
but times change, attitudes change. So that I married my wife. I married my best friends. I don't want a maid. I want somebody I can actually talk to and have an intelligent conversation with. Like say, I have enough time trying to talk to the 2 or 3-year-old. Say, car. Cute with it. Meanwhile, I can talk to my wife about her about world events, philosophy, movies. So the counseling degree she's working on. Just absolutely fascinating conversations. Except somebody I can treat as an equal, trust as an equal, somebody who basically is literally a partner instead of just there. Yeah.
Make sure his wife sees this YouTube video.
I've been married many years. There's no such thing as brownie points.
Get the word he belongs.
Actually, I bought flowers for her one day just because. And lady checkout counter says, "Oh, you're trying to get a get out of jail free card." I said, "I've been married too long. That didn't work like that." Anyway, Lynn killed me. But Frankfurt Assembly collapses by 1849. The German rulers would accept the Constitution. So many ratchets thrown in the works. The Frankfurt Assembly, it just basically collapses. It's a little more than a glorified debating society. But the revolution spreads also to Austria. And Austria nearly comes apart at the seams over the revolution of 1848. For example, go here to page 638 in your book. 638, yeah. Look at the borders of nations of Europe under the Treaty of Vienna. Germanic Confederation got about half of the about half of the territory of the Austrian Empire within the Germanic Confederation, the rest out of it. Pay very close attention to these borders. Now, look on page 649. This map of the different language groups of Europe. Now, they are not at all matching the national boundaries. This is Austria's great problem, is 19th century they are ruling. Germans just make up a third of Austria, but they're ruling a dozen other different ethnic groups. 2/3 of the country. Hungarians, Slovenes, Slovaks, Czechs, Romanians, Hungarians, and many others. People who have nothing in common with the Austrians really don't like the Austrians. They want them gone. And this is all in addition to people within Austria, Germans themselves, living in Vienna, who believe that the government is too corrupt, does not speak for the people, and a republic must be proclaimed. So, in Hungary, part of Austria, you have this man, Louis Kossuth. Hungarian independence leader believes that the Hungarians should be able to determine their own fate. Hungary once been an independent country. They want independence again. One of the things calling for autonomy or a commonwealth within Austria, basically self-determination for the people of Hungary for their own local affairs. You also have demonstrations all across Austria demanding changes in government. Clemens von Metternich, who had been the Austrian foreign minister, who had blocked so many attempts at reform over the years in country after country, especially within Austria, one of the most hated men in Austria. So many demonstrations against him that Metternich resigns and leaves the country. The Czechs are demanding their own government. They're severely repressed by the Austrian army. In the middle of all of this, you have the Austrian Emperor, Ferdinand I. He's the emperor from 1835 to 1848. Problem is, he is entirely mentally disabled. Actually, mentally retarded. And basically, yeah, he's the emperor of Austria. He's run that whole thing that includes Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and all those other countries. He's the guy in charge of all of it.
How did he become your follower?
Excellent question on TV. You'd asked. Hereditary monarchy. He was the oldest surviving son.
Yeah, that's the only way it would have happened. There's no way he would have been. There's no way they would have.
Otherwise, no way, but it said that because of tradition.
So by him being,
Yeah, basically, he's not clever. He just doesn't have the mental faculties he needs to rally the people or make effective decisions.
so
Thinks
someone
he has-
reform, right?
Yeah, the people are asking for reform, but he has all these advisors arguing against one way or another. He just can't make decisions. He just doesn't have the capacity to do that.
And he had a lot of advisors, not just.
Oh yeah, a lot of advisors, but
Not just one, but I'm saying not just like one that he knew for
Yeah.
sure he could turn to for
Yeah.
sure.
not just one main one. They had a whole bunch of them. They're trying to convince one way or another. He's can be easily manipulated. Just it's really not fit for office, but because he's the oldest surviving son, hereditary monarchy. Guess what? That's who you're stuck with. Like say, just he was married. He had kids, but because he was the king. Yeah. I say.
Were his kids okay?
Yeah, they were okay. Like I said, basically had these problems because of the severe inbreeding of the royal family.
Like the
Fresh
cousins-
genes brought in the kind of a what's that?
Like the cousins.
Yeah, too many cousins marrying each other,
Yeah.
which explains South Carolina. That's it. But say he might, yeah,
Why did they keep doing that when his fathers were dead?
Howard money. Like they
They
recognize.
knew this was
Yeah, they recognize there's a problem with it. You can go back to the Bible saying that brothers and sisters don't get married. Yeah, so they knew there was a problem. Like say, suppose brother and sister get married and have kids. Just suspend your nausea for a minute.
Uh-huh.
50% chance that child from that union is going to be born with severe birth defects, deformities in limbs, brain deformities, and just supposing that kid's lucky enough to go on that 50% line, 50% chance that child's children will have those deformities,
But I'm real bad for it.
if their parents don't. So those genes basically they're damaged, they're twisted and warped around.
So they just didn't really care.
They really didn't care because it's all about money and power.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Cousins are marrying to keep all that property, all that money within the family.
I have a question.
I got an answer.
Okay, people that believe that God created Adam and Eve and all that, okay, Adam and Eve is supposedly the first woman and the first man. Where do they think civilization came from? I mean, don't they make that connection?
It's a definite
They
whole
don't have to
theory.
marry their brothers and sisters?
Like say, what happened to everybody? Where did Mrs. Cain and Mrs. Abel come from? Except of course, Adam and Eve did have kids beyond that, but not very common mention about it. But then you got the issue about Noah's Ark. If everyone else at Noah's family's wiped out, what happens from there? But it's, like I say, the Bible leaves out a lot of details on some things. It's what we call plot holes.
And were they still predominantly Catholic churches or?
Yeah, in Austria they're mostly Catholic. But really, it depends on where you're at. Yeah.
Speaking about the Bible, you know how it says King James?
Mm-hmm.
So did King James dictate what was written in the Bible?
Basically, he got the scholars together to decide who's going to write this English translation of the Bible. They already had William Tyndale translated most of the Old Testament already. They got a few scholars translating the New Testament, but there was some editing process and editorializing going on.
So how will we know if they didn't translate it right? How will we know that?
That's been a serious contention for a long time. So basically, it's a translation of a translation of a translation.
So it could have gotten.
Like I said, there might have been some things that were off. So read different translations of the Bible. You've got New International Version, King James Version, New Revised Standard Version, New King James. Notice it's slightly different.
Right.
Like I said, some of those translations, some of those words, inflections in words, sometimes that's a judgment call. So, and plus you have to put it in a way that kind of makes sense.
My mom reads the Hebrew version, which was the original.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she translates it herself.
Like I said, the earliest versions of the New Testament are Greek and Hebrew and stuff. But some of the earliest examples available really weren't available until like the 4th century. Centuries after those men lived. So there's theologians and having a lot of debates over what's the best translation, what's the proper way to translate, the way that gets it right and keeps everything in context, and of course, translating the Bible, what is most in spirit with the Word of God.
I'm just kind of confused on it. I'm not so much as confused on it, but you hear different.
Yeah, so you hear different things. And people have their own favorite versions of the Bible because some people love King James because that's what they were raised on, and they love the poetry behind it, the meter and the rhyme behind it. You have more modern translations. Some people find more accessible. Some like more than others. Some are more poetic in the writing.
Isn't King James, isn't that how it's written? Isn't it like Shakespeare? Is that how they?
It's a transition period. It's just after Shakespeare, but the way they're writing, language changing so fast that, like I said, read Shakespeare, read King James. That's only about 30 years difference.
Oh.
But the language is changing so rapidly that King James Version was considered to be old-fashioned
Is that how
writing.
they talk as well?
Yeah.
Really? So he was right how they talk back then.
Yeah, it was actually modern English. It's different from Middle English, but it's a transition. English goes through a rapid transition in the 1500s and 1600s, changing it from Middle English to something that's more recognizable.
I didn't know that. actually how they talk to each
Oh,
other.
I'm part.
Poor Ferdinand, though. That's that all this is going on, and his most profound statement was about dinner one night. Said, "I'm the emperor, and I want dumplings."
Well,
Not helpful. So the country is falling apart. Poor Ferdinand just can't do anything about it. We have radical leaders seizing large parts of the capital, Vienna, demanding a new constitution. Well, finally, the army is able to get together and crush those radicals. And so he goes here to page 655. You see the maps of all the uprisings across Europe from the revolutions of 1848, from Paris all the way to Krakow, Poland, which is actually Austrian. But Vienna is retaken, or basically what areas that were taken, or the revolution was crushed. And the government basically decides Ferdinand just isn't up to the job. They have to get him out. So it's an unpopular a symbol of the problems with Austria, and he doesn't have the capacity to do anything about it. So they quietly push him aside in favor of a new emperor, his nephew, Francis Joseph I. Young man, very energetic. He'll rule until his death in World War I, 1916. He will be king for 68 years. Lived a very long time. His son, who was assassinated in 1914, that caused the revolution to start, World War I to start. But Francis Joseph comes in. Basically, the country is flying apart. The Czechs are moving away. The revolutions in Hungary, all over, everywhere. The Italian portions of the Austrian Empire, uprisings in the Polish portions of it, and they just can't seem to get under control. Basically, they're just barely treading water at this point. Just barely maintaining control over the situation. So, in comes Nicholas I, Tsar of Russia. Remember the policeman of Europe? He sees the situation in Austria, sees that revolutions have risen up again in portions of Poland, which would undoubtedly spread to the portions of Poland that he controls. Hungarian threatening to split away. And Nicholas is concerned that the success of this revolution, if it is successful in Austria, it can spread to Russia. Because remember, in Russia, it's not just Russians. You've got over 100 different languages being spoken in Russia, 100 different ethnic groups. And not all of them like the Russians very much. Well, Nicholas I, having come to power in the midst of a attempted uprising against him, it's sworn he's never going to let any threat to his throne come again, whether it's in his country or someone else's country.
When did he come to power?
1825. Remember, December's revolt. So he gone around crushing revolutions and rebellions everywhere, and 1848 is no different. So Francis Joseph I couldn't get the job done. Like I say, he's on verge of making a deal with Louis Kossuth. Nicholas I steps in and basically crushes all these revolutions himself, was preserving Francis Joseph's power. The Hungarians are crushed. The revolution's defeated. Kossuth flees abroad, fearing for his life. Actually goes to the United States for a while, trying to rally support for the revolution in the Hungarian Revolution in the United States. In fact, he actually speaks before Congress. And if you go to the U.S. Capitol building, you'll notice a small corner there, a bust of Louis Kossuth. He's the only foreigner to have a statue in the United States Capitol. It's that respected, that admired. And in his years of exile, he still continues to speak for Hungarian independence and trying to encourage and rally the Hungarians still back under Austrian rule. But the Czechs are crushed, the Poles are crushed, the Hungarians are crushed. Francis Joseph restored to full power, but the position of Austria's control over everybody else is very shaky. Now we go to Italy. And go back here to page 644. See the map of Italy as it exists in the mid-19th century. Again, a patchwork of different states in one united Italy. So, we have this man, Giuseppe Mazzini. In 1831, he started a movement called Young Italy, basically trying to unite young Italian professionals all across Italy, across all the different Italian states, and trying to rally them to the cause of Italian unification. While the organization doesn't gather a lot of steam, the idea really does. And a lot more people start talking about Italy unifying, becoming one country again. So this hadn't happened. Last time Italy was united under its own control was the Roman Empire, 14 centuries earlier. And they want that unification again. So, 1848, the revolutions come, and they come to Italy as well. Particularly, area of Sicily. It's called the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. Revolution breaks out in Sicily, starts spreading northward on the peninsula. Rulers in these different countries start granting new constitutions to the people, very liberal constitutions, calling for representative constituencies, expanding the right to vote, different degrees of civil liberties. And in the provinces of Lombardy and Venetia, these are northern Italy, and northeastern Italy. In 1848, you have a revolt against Austria. Austria controlled these two pieces of Italy. So they want to be freed from Austrian control. And they're going to do whatever it takes. So throughout Italy, there's a lot of support for Lombardy and Venetia. And particularly in this particular kingdom, Italian kingdom, called Sardinia-Piedmont. Sardinia-Piedmont, you have a king named Charles Albert I. Carlos Alberti. He's king from 1831 to 1849. About his reign, he had this Young Italy movement. He was a believer in it. That Italy could be unified. And particularly seeing his kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont as being the key to that. Also, Charles Albert is sending in support for Lombardy, Venetia. Venetia had been an independent republic for centuries before Napoleon came along. And after the Napoleonic Wars, Venetia is added to Austria. And Venetia and Venice, they are declaring a republic again, but now that Austria is back under control again, Francis Joseph I sends his army, the Austrians, against the Italians, crushes the revolt in Venetia, and then goes after Charles Albert because he had been supporting these independence efforts in Lombardy and Venetia. Well, Charles Albert loses, but he's forced to abdicate. But he's considered to be a great hero across all of Italy because Charles Albert is willing to lead this war of national liberation against Austria. But with the fall of Charles Albert, though he's still popular across Italy, the leaders in these other Italian states decide that they're going to rise up and take away all his new constitutions they just granted. Basically a counter-revolution. So everything's back to where it was, all except Sardinia and Piedmont. So conditions in Italy are ripe for one person and one movement to push forward Italian unification. Now we get back to France. Now Charles Lee Napoleon becomes Napoleon III. So go here to page 671. See the man himself. Napoleon III was dismissed initially, calling him Napoleon the Small. He's about 5'5". He's actually taller than his uncle Napoleon by a couple of inches, but
I was just saying we're all the Bonaparte. Of course they short.
yeah, they're all a little bit on the small side. But they're really kind of more referring to his political and military stature. Just like I said, Napoleon Bonaparte, though a small man, he's kind of a giant in France. Great figure, this great hero, and his nephew seems like this kind of a pale imitation. Well, he proves to be a slightly better politician. He calmly won support of the National Assembly and the people. Very popular figure. France recovers from the Depression of 1846 very well. It's prospering under Bonaparte's presidency. But in 1851, he's asking permission of the National Assembly to run for re-election. Of course, it's quite clear that he would win easily, but the National Assembly fears his popularity and rejects his petition. So as a result, he resorts to a few of the old family tricks, and his troops go in and seize the National Assembly in December 1851. He restores universal male suffrage and quickly poses a referendum to the people of France. One simple question: should the French Empire be restored? 97% say yes. And so, the Second Republic falls and is replaced by the Second Empire. This one and only inhabitant emperor, Charles Lee Napoleon Bonaparte, who becomes Emperor Napoleon III.
It might be crazy. Okay. Why was it so important back then to have? I mean, it was like power was just, and money was just like. What did you say?
But it's.
But it don't seem like it's as bad as it was back then. They were like literally off with your head if you wouldn't right
Yeah.
back then.
Said there are a lot more bloodthirsty back then,
They had
definitely.
no rights and not very much food.
Exactly. The democracy to put them back for that.
Yeah,
I mean,
Except- seems so. The
Yeah.
ideas of civil liberties like we have today, like they have in France today, didn't exist at this point. So they weren't quite as ingrained. Americans, so they'd kind of grown up expecting the ideas of, of equal justice under law, trial by jury, due process, and all that, free speech, but still kind of new in France. So Europe is still in the habit of monarchy in the mid-1800s. So they didn't have quite the long history with the civil liberties that the Americans had. Like say Britain, for all its problems, that it was considered to be one of the freer countries in Europe. But why the quest for power? So, well, like the British historian Lord Acton once said, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So it's like giving an alcoholic bottle and just said they want more and more until they just can't get enough. Do people still want power and money today? Oh yeah,
but I'm saying
it's just in different ways because it's
okay.
the rules have changed a little bit. You can have absolutism at this point. It's just not accepted today. But there are other ways you can get
It
it.
don't mean as much as it did.
Oh, yeah.
It means as much, but it's different. The game's changed just a little bit.
Okay.
They rearranged the chairs around. But you can't have absolutism in government anymore, but in business, oh yeah. Except, think some of these large corporations we have today, they have a larger gross, they have more money than some countries do. They can buy politicians. They don't need to win an election because they can pick the politicians, pay for their campaign, and get exactly what they want.
Yeah.
Take for example the Koch brothers. Big industrialists that own Georgia Pacific and a million other companies,
Yeah.
multi-billionaires. Why don't they run for the office themselves?
Wow.
Too much trouble.
Wow.
They don't need to. So they can pick who they want to be president or governor or legislator or Congress because they can pay for all those campaigns. They can buy the media they need to convince public opinion. They have more money than they ever want. They can have power because they can buy the government they need. They don't need to seize it a coup. They can buy it. And that way, they can do whatever they want. Like the old saying that Mark Twain said in the late 1800s about this that time, said, you rob a train and go to jail. You steal a railroad and go to Congress. Like say, you shoot and kill some man on Hillsborough, you're going to jail. But you mismanage your factory and some guy dies in a factory accident, you just fire the manager and say it was his fault. Pay a little bit of money, it's done.
Have a little bit of extra paperwork, but
Yeah, exactly. Basically, it's the same thing. Absolute power, but in a very different way. And so Napoleon III comes in with absolute power. And he does very well at first. It just is not conquest like his uncles had been, but like I say, trying to stabilize France, trying to keep up his own popularity, trying to stay in power. Napoleon III controlled the military, the police, the civil service. Not only he could initiate legislation to declare war. Basically, it's his little country, and he's going to call the shots. But Frenchmen trusted the Bonapartes, so they wanted. So let him do it. Yeah, just that one small legislative body elected to 6-year terms for universal male suffrage. But basically, just a rubber stamp for him. But what he's going to do is he's going to try to strengthen France through other means, not just military, but industrial and economic and financial means. Like I say, increasingly, moving to the late 19th into the 20th century, the idea of nation being powerful and conquering by armies is being displaced by nations conquering with dollars. Money. And we start seeing that translation. Look at that happening here. We'll talk about that more next time.
That's the bottom line for everything.
Money is the bottom line.